You said nothing, but they felt everything. In the quiet of a room, in the pause between two breaths, in the space where a word could have been spoken, a truth can be louder than any proclamation. That is the paradox at the heart of today's story. A story about the invisible weight of our actions, the silent language of presence, and the ancient wisdom of Stoic justice that reminds us that what we do or fail to do is the true measure of who we are. Welcome, listener. I invite you to settle into a comfortable seat, to let the world outside fade for a while, and to travel with me through a landscape of thought that stretches from the bustling streets of modern life back to the marble columns of ancient Athens and the rugged hills of Roman philosophy. As we move, we will meet characters who speak without words. We will hear the echo of a philosophy that has survived wars and empires, and we will discover how the quiet choices we make each day can become the most powerful statements we ever utter. The scene opens in a small office on a rainy Tuesday morning. The rain taps a steady rhythm against the window, a reminder that the world outside is moving, changing, indifferent. Inside, a team gathers around a polished table. The manager, Elena, has called the meeting to discuss a recent project that missed its deadline. The air is thick with anticipation, with the unspoken question: who will take responsibility? Who will offer an excuse? Who will remain silent? At the far end of the table sits Marcus, a young analyst who has been with the company for just over a year. He watches his colleagues shift in their seats, watches the tension rise, and feels a knot tighten in his stomach. He knows that the project's failure was not his fault alone. It was a collective misstep, a series of missed signals, a lack of clear direction. Yet he also knows that the eyes of his peers are on him, that the silence he carries could be interpreted as acceptance, as guilt, as indifference. Elena looks around, her gaze lingering on each face. She asks, what went wrong? The room erupts with explanations, with blame, with attempts to shift the narrative. One colleague points to a supplier delay. Another mentions a miscommunication with the client. A third raises concerns about resource allocation. The conversation spirals, each voice trying to be heard, each argument trying to protect a reputation. When the chatter finally subsides, Elena turns to Marcus. She says, "Marcus, you have been quiet. What do you think?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with expectation. Marcus feels the weight of the moment. He could speak, could defend, could deflect. He could also remain silent, letting the noise of others drown out his own voice. He chooses the latter. In that instant, something remarkable happens. The room, filled with words, pauses. The silence that follows is not empty, it is charged. The other participants feel the presence of Marcus's unspoken response. They sense his awareness, his restraint, his inner calculation. They feel the impact of his silence more profoundly than any spoken defense could have delivered. Why does this happen? Why does a simple act of not speaking become a powerful statement? To answer that, we must step back from the office and look at the broader canvas of human interaction. We must examine the ways in which our actions, even the absence of action, communicate values, intentions, and judgments. And we must turn to a philosophy that has spent centuries dissecting the nature of justice, responsibility, and the moral weight of our deeds: Stoicism. Stoicism was born in the bustling agora of Athens in the 3rd century BCE, a time when the city was a crucible of ideas, politics, and commerce. Its founder, Zeno of Citium, taught that the path to a good life lay not in external circumstances, but in the cultivation of inner virtue. He argued that the universe is ordered by a rational principle, that human beings possess a spark of that rationality, and that living in accordance with reason is the highest good. Later, the Stoic tradition was carried forward by thinkers such as Cleanthes, Chrysippus, and most famously the Roman statesmen and writers Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Their works have survived the ages, offering guidance on how to confront adversity, how to treat others, and how to understand the nature of justice. Justice, for the Stoics, is not merely a legal concept. It is a cardinal virtue, one of the four pillars that support a moral life: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Justice in this context is the harmonious alignment of our actions with the common good, the recognition that each person is a part of a larger whole, and the commitment to treat others with fairness, respect, and empathy. When we say, "You said nothing but they felt everything," we are touching on a profound Stoic insight. The moral weight of our behavior is not measured by the applause it receives, but by the effect it has on the souls around us. A silent act of integrity can be more just than a loud proclamation of virtue. A quiet refusal to join a harmful crowd can be more courageous than a shouted rally. A calm acceptance of responsibility, even when no one asks for it, can be more temperate than a defensive outburst. Let us return to Marcus in the meeting. His silence was not a sign of cowardice. It was a deliberate choice, rooted in an understanding of his role within the collective. He recognized that the meeting was already saturated with noise, that adding his voice might have only amplified the chaos. He also understood that his silence would speak to his colleagues, that he trusted them to find the truth, that he was not seeking personal vindication, that he was willing to bear the discomfort of being misunderstood rather than contribute to a culture of blame. In that moment, Marcus embodied a Stoic principle known as the inner citadel. The inner citadel is the mental fortress that protects a person's rational core from external turbulence. By maintaining composure, by choosing when to speak and when to remain silent, Marcus kept his inner citadel intact. He did not allow the external pressure to dictate his response. He acted in accordance with his own reasoned judgment, not with the impulse to defend his ego. The impact of his silence rippled through the room. Elena, the manager, felt a shift. She sensed that Marcus's restraint was a subtle form of accountability. She realized that the meeting needed a different kind of leadership, one that would not rely on blame but on constructive synthesis. The other team members, who had been quick to point fingers, felt a quiet pressure to reflect on their own contributions. The silence forced them to look inward, to consider whether their words were serving the truth or merely protecting themselves. Stoic justice teaches us that the true measure of an action is its contribution to the common good. In the office scenario, the common good is the health of the team, the success of future projects, and the preservation of trust. Marcus's silence, though seemingly passive, actively promoted these goals. It prevented the meeting from devolving into a shouting match. It preserved the dignity of each participant, and it opened a space for deeper reflection. Now let us broaden the lens further. Imagine a parent watching their child stumble and fall on a playground. The child looks up, eyes wide, expecting a comforting word. The parent could rush in, pick the child up, say it's okay, you're safe, and move on. Or the parent could stay still, allowing the child a moment to process the fall, to feel the sting, to learn that the world can be rough but also that they have the capacity to rise again. The parent's silence in this case is not neglect, it is a deliberate act of teaching resilience, of fostering inner strength. The child feels the parent's presence, feels the weight of the unspoken lesson, and internalizes a sense of self-reliance. Stoic philosophers would describe this as the practice of teaching by example. The most powerful lessons are not always spoken, they are lived. When a leader demonstrates calm in crisis, when a friend listens without interrupting, when a citizen respects the law even when no one watches, they are embodying justice through silent action. Their behavior becomes a beacon, a silent signal that says, "I am aligned with reason, I am committed to the common good, I trust in the moral order of the universe." Consider the story of the Roman general Scipio Africanus, who, after a decisive victory over Hannibal at Zama, chose not to parade his triumph in a lavish celebration. Instead, he returned to Rome with modesty, refusing to indulge in personal glory. His restraint was a silent statement that the victory belonged to the Republic, not to his own ego. The Senate and the people felt his humility, and the moral fabric of the state was reinforced. Scipio's silence on personal aggrandizement was louder than any victory speech could have been. In modern times, we see similar patterns. A whistleblower who steps forward not to gain fame but to protect the public interest often faces intense scrutiny. Yet when they choose to remain anonymous, to let the facts speak for themselves, the impact can be profound. Their silence about personal identity allows the focus to remain on the injustice they expose. The public feels the weight of the truth, unclouded by personal drama. The justice served is pure, untainted by ego. The Stoic concept of apatheia, often mistranslated as indifference, is actually a state of freedom from destructive passions. It does not mean that a Stoic is cold or unfeeling, rather it means that the Stoic is not ruled by uncontrolled emotions. In the context of our theme, apatheia allows a person to respond to provocation, to criticism, to accusation, without being swept away by shame, anger, or fear. This emotional equilibrium enables the person to choose silence when it serves justice, or speech when it serves truth. When we examine the phrase, "you said nothing but they felt everything," we see a paradox that is at the core of human communication. The most powerful messages are often those that are not spoken. The feeling that arises in the listener is a response to the perceived intention behind the silence. If the silence is interpreted as indifference, the listener may feel ignored, dismissed, or even threatened. If the silence is interpreted as contemplation, the listener may feel respected, understood, or inspired. The meaning of silence is not inherent, it is co-created by the sender and the receiver, shaped by context, history, and shared values. Stoic justice reminds us that we have a responsibility to shape that meaning consciously. We must ask ourselves, what do I intend to convey through my silence? Am I protecting my own ego, or am I protecting the dignity of others? Am I avoiding conflict out of fear, or am I fostering a space for deeper understanding? The answers guide whether our silence aligns with virtue. Let us return once more to the office meeting. After the initial discussion, Elena decides to change the format of the conversation. She asks each team member to write down, in a few sentences, what they could have done differently, without naming anyone else. She then collects the notes and reads them aloud, anonymized. The room becomes a place of collective reflection, rather than accusation. Marcus's earlier silence now feels like a seed that has sprouted into a new culture of accountability. The team feels a renewed sense of trust, a feeling that their leader values honesty over blame, that each person's contribution matters, that the group can move forward together. The lesson here is that silence can be a catalyst. It can be a pause that allows the next step to be more thoughtful, more just. It can be a mirror that reflects the inner state of those around us, prompting them to examine their own motives. It can be a shield that protects the vulnerable, a bridge that connects hearts, a compass that points toward the common good. Now let us explore how we can cultivate this kind of mindful silence in our own lives. The Stoics offered several practical exercises that can help us develop the inner discipline required to choose our words and our silences wisely. First, the practice of daily reflection. At the end of each day, set aside a few minutes to review the moments when you spoke and when you remained silent. Ask yourself, did my words serve truth? Did my silence protect or harm? Did I act out of fear, pride, or genuine concern for others? By habitually examining these moments, you train your mind to recognize the patterns that lead to just or unjust behavior. Second, the exercise of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Before entering a situation where conflict may arise, a meeting, a family gathering, a social media discussion, imagine the possible triggers. Visualize yourself feeling the urge to defend yourself, to retaliate, to dominate the conversation. Then picture yourself responding with calm, with measured speech, or with purposeful silence. This mental rehearsal builds a buffer between stimulus and reaction, allowing reason to guide your response. Third, the cultivation of empathy through perspective taking. When someone accuses you or brings up a painful memory, pause and consider their point of view. What fears or insecurities might be driving their words? By understanding the other person's inner landscape, you can choose a response that acknowledges their feelings without compromising your own integrity. Often, the most powerful response is a simple acknowledgement, "I hear you," followed by a pause. That pause signals that you are not dismissing them, but that you are processing their words with care. Fourth, the practice of negative visualization. Imagine losing the ability to speak, perhaps due to illness, imprisonment, or a sudden silence imposed by circumstance. Feel the weight of that loss. In that imagined state, you become acutely aware of the value of each word you utter. This awareness naturally leads you to speak less, to choose your words more carefully, and to recognize the potency of silence. Fifth, the habit of gratitude for the present moment. When you are fully present, you are less likely to react impulsively. You notice the subtle cues in a conversation, the tone, the body language, the pauses. You become attuned to the unspoken messages that flow between people. In that state, you can respond in a way that honors the shared humanity of the interaction. By integrating these practices, you develop a personal inner citadel that is resilient to external pressures. You become the kind of person whose silence is not a void, but a deliberate, meaningful space that others can feel and respect. Let us now imagine a different scenario, one that takes place not in an office but on a public street. A young woman, Maya, walks home after a long day. She passes a group of teenagers who are shouting, laughing, and tossing a soda can onto the sidewalk. One of them spots Maya and with a sneer throws the can at her feet. The can clatters, spilling soda onto her shoes. The teenagers laugh louder, expecting a reaction, anger, a curse, a confrontation. Maya feels the sting of the soda, the heat of embarrassment, the surge of anger. She could shout, could chase them, could call the police. Instead, she bends down, wipes her shoe, and continues walking, her head held high. She does not look back, does not engage. The teenagers, seeing her calm, feel a sudden shift. Their laughter falters. One of them, perhaps the one who threw the can, looks at Maya's composed stride and feels a pang of shame. The group disperses. The street returns to its ordinary rhythm. Later, a passerby who witnessed the incident tells Maya, "You didn't say anything, but I could feel how strong you are." Maya smiles, and the passerby's words become a quiet affirmation of her inner justice. Maya's silence was a Stoic act. She chose not to give the teenagers the emotional fuel they sought. She refused to let their aggression dictate her response. In doing so, she upheld the virtue of temperance, self-control over impulse, and justice, by not allowing the wrongdoing to go unaddressed, but addressing it in a way that did not perpetuate further harm. The ripple effect of Maya's silence extended beyond the immediate moment. The teenagers, perhaps for the first time, sensed that their actions could be met with dignity rather than escalation. The passerby, moved by Maya's composure, may carry that lesson into his own interactions. The street, a microcosm of society, experienced a subtle shift toward a more respectful atmosphere. Stoic justice is not about passive acceptance of injustice. It is about active engagement with the world in a way that aligns with reason and virtue. It is about recognizing that every action, whether a spoken word, a written note, a raised hand, or a quiet step away, carries moral weight. It is about understanding that the impact of our behavior is measured not by the applause it receives, but by the inner peace it cultivates and the harmony it fosters in the community. Now, let us examine the concept of social silence in the digital age. Social media platforms have become arenas where opinions clash, where accusations fly, where the temptation to respond instantly is ever present. A single tweet can spark a firestorm, a comment can be taken out of context, a meme can be weaponized. In this environment, the decision to remain silent can be a radical act of justice. Consider a scenario where a friend posts a controversial opinion that you disagree with, but you suspect that publicly confronting them will only deepen division. You could write a scathing reply, tag them, start a thread. Or you could choose to send them a private message, expressing your concerns calmly, or you could simply refrain from responding publicly, allowing the conversation to move on without adding fuel. Your silence in this case protects the broader community from unnecessary conflict, while still honoring your personal values through a more thoughtful private dialogue. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that we should not be concerned with the opinions of the masses, but with the judgment of our own reason. He said, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In the realm of online discourse, this teaching is especially relevant. The noise of the crowd can drown out reason. By stepping back, by choosing silence, you preserve your capacity for clear judgment. However, silence is not a blanket excuse for inaction. There are moments when speaking up is essential, when injustice is systemic, when a vulnerable person is being harmed, when silence would be complicit. The Stoics recognized this nuance. They advocated for active silence, a state where one refrains from unnecessary speech, but remains ready to act when virtue demands it. A modern illustration of active silence can be found in the story of a nurse, Elena, working in an emergency department. One night, a patient's family becomes aggressive, shouting accusations at the staff. The nurse feels the surge of anger. She could shout, could chase them, could call the police. Instead, she bends down, wipes her shoe, and continues walking, her head held high. She does not look back, does not engage. The teenagers, seeing her calm, feel a sudden shift. Their laughter falters. One of them, perhaps the one who threw the can, looks at Maya's composed stride and feels a pang of shame. The group disperses. The street returns to its ordinary rhythm. Later, a passerby who witnessed the incident tells Maya, "You didn't say anything, but I could feel how strong you are." Maya smiles, and the passerby's words become a quiet affirmation of her inner justice. Maya's silence was a Stoic act. She chose not to give the teenagers the emotional fuel they sought. She refused to let their aggression dictate her response. In doing so, she upheld the virtue of temperance, self-control over impulse, and justice by not allowing the wrongdoing to go unaddressed, but addressing it in a way that did not perpetuate further harm. The ripple effect of Maya's silence extended beyond the immediate moment. The teenagers, perhaps for the first time, sensed that their actions could be met with dignity rather than escalation. The passerby, moved by Maya's composure, may carry that lesson into his own interactions. The street, a microcosm of society, experienced a subtle shift toward a more respectful atmosphere. Stoic justice is not about passive acceptance of injustice. It is about active engagement with the world in a way that aligns with reason and virtue. It is about recognizing that every action, whether a spoken word, a written note, a raised hand, or a quiet step away, carries moral weight. It is about understanding that the impact of our behavior is measured not by the applause it receives, but by the inner peace it cultivates and the harmony it fosters in the community. Now, let us examine the concept of social silence in the digital age. Social media platforms have become arenas where opinions clash, where accusations fly, where the temptation to respond instantly is ever present. A single tweet can spark a firestorm, a comment can be taken out of context, a meme can be weaponized. In this environment, the decision to remain silent can be a radical act of justice. Consider a scenario where a friend posts a controversial opinion that you disagree with, but you suspect that publicly confronting them will only deepen division. You could write a scathing reply, tag them, start a thread, or you could choose to send them a private message expressing your concerns calmly, or you could simply refrain from responding publicly, allowing the conversation to move on without adding fuel. Your silence in this case protects the broader community from unnecessary conflict while still honoring your personal values through a more thoughtful private dialogue. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that we should not be concerned with the opinions of the masses, but with the judgment of our own reason. He said, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In the realm of online discourse, this teaching is especially relevant. The noise of the crowd can drown out reason. By stepping back, by choosing silence, you preserve your capacity for clear judgment. However, silence is not a blanket excuse for inaction. There are moments when speaking up is essential, when injustice is systemic, when a vulnerable person is being harmed, when silence would be complicit. The Stoics recognized this nuance. They advocated for active silence, a state where one refrains from unnecessary speech but remains ready to act when virtue demands it. A modern illustration of active silence can be found in the story of a nurse, Elena, working in an emergency department. One night, a patient's family becomes aggressive, shouting accusations at the staff. The nurse feels the surge of anger, the urge to defend herself. She takes a breath, steps back and says nothing. Instead, she signals a colleague who calmly intervenes, de-escalates the situation, and addresses the family's concerns. Elena's silence prevented the escalation, protected the patient's care, and upheld the principle of non-maleficence. Her silence was not passive, it was a strategic, compassionate choice aligned with professional ethics. Stoic justice also teaches us to consider the broader web of cause and effect. When we act or refrain from speaking, we set in motion a chain of consequences that may extend far beyond the immediate moment. The ancient Roman statesman Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the interconnectedness of all things, reminding himself that the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. By aligning our thoughts with virtue, we influence the flow of events toward harmony. Let us now explore a more intimate setting: a marriage. Two partners, Alex and Sam, have been together for several years. One evening, Alex returns home exhausted, having faced a difficult day at work. Sam, feeling neglected, brings up a past argument about finances that had been resolved months ago. Sam's tone is sharp, the words are loaded, the memory is fresh. Alex feels the sting of being judged again for something already settled. Alex could respond defensively, could argue that the issue is closed, could raise his own grievances. He could also choose to remain silent, to listen, to acknowledge Sam's feelings without reopening the old wound. He says, "I hear you, it sounds like you're still worried about that. Let's talk about what's on your mind now." The silence that follows Sam's initial outburst is not empty, it is filled with Alex's calm presence, his willingness to be heard, his commitment to the partnership. Sam, feeling the steadiness of Alex's response, begins to lower his voice. He explains that the financial stress is resurfacing because of a new expense. The conversation shifts from blame to problem solving. The couple works together to adjust their budget, to plan for the new expense, to reaffirm their shared goals. The past argument, once a source of tension, becomes a catalyst for deeper communication. In this domestic scene, the Stoic virtues of justice and temperance are at play. Justice is expressed through mutual respect and the willingness to address each other's concerns. Temperance is shown in Alex's restraint, his avoidance of reactive anger. The silence between the words is a space where empathy grows, where the couple can rebuild trust. Now, let us consider the role of silence in leadership. A leader who constantly speaks, who fills every meeting with directives, may appear decisive, but can also drown out the voices of those they lead. A leader who knows when to stay quiet, who allows others to step forward, creates an environment where responsibility is shared, where innovation can emerge from unexpected places. The ancient Stoic king Zeno of Citium taught his students that a ruler's power lies not in the volume of his decrees, but in the moral example he sets. A ruler who listens more than he commands earns the loyalty of his people. A ruler who reacts with fury to criticism loses the respect of his subjects. In modern corporate culture, this lesson translates into the practice of active listening. When a manager asks a team member for an update and then remains silent, giving the employee space to speak fully, the manager demonstrates trust and humility. The employee feels valued, the team's morale rises, and the organization benefits from clearer communication. The phrase, "you said nothing but they felt everything," captures the paradox of influence without overt expression. It reminds us that influence is not solely a function of speech, it is also a function of presence, of consistency, of the quiet integrity that underlies our actions. When we align our inner world with the Stoic virtues, our outer world begins to reflect that alignment, even in the moments when we are not speaking. To bring this exploration to a close, let us summarize the key insights we have uncovered. First, silence can be a powerful moral tool. It can protect, teach, heal, and inspire when used with intention. Second, Stoic justice frames silence not as indifference, but as a deliberate choice that serves the common good. It asks us to ask ourselves why we are silent and what effect our silence will have. Third, the impact of silence is co-created. The receiver's perception, the context, and the history between people shape how silence is interpreted. Therefore, we must cultivate empathy to ensure our silence is read as we intend. Fourth, the Stoic practices of daily reflection, premeditation of adversity, perspective-taking, negative visualization, and gratitude help us develop the inner discipline needed to choose our words and our silences wisely. Fifth, in every sphere of life, work, family, public spaces, digital platforms, leadership, there are moments where speaking up would fuel conflict and moments where silence would betray injustice. The art of Stoic justice lies in discerning which is which. Sixth, the ultimate goal is not to become a master of silence for its own sake, but to become a person whose inner citadel is strong enough that every action, spoken or unspoken, aligns with reason, virtue, and the well-being of the community. As you leave this narration, I invite you to carry these ideas with you. The next time you find yourself in a heated discussion, pause, feel the breath in your chest, ask yourself, what would a Stoic do? What would serve justice more than a quick retort? What truth can be conveyed through a calm pause? Let the answer guide you. Remember, you do not need to shout to be heard. You do not need to dominate to be respected. You do not need to fill every silence with words to be valued. You need only the quiet confidence that comes from living in harmony with reason, from honoring the common good, and from recognizing that sometimes the most resonant voice is the one that does not speak. Thank you for listening. May your silences be as meaningful as your words, and may your life reflect the timeless justice of the Stoics.